to Inside Politics. Our guests today are Tony Spence, who's the head of the Catholic News Service, and Rick Masacchio, the editor of the Tennessee Register and communications director for the Catholic Diocese. We're talking about the upcoming visit next month to this country of Pope Francis. Gentlemen, as the Pope comes over here, his popularity numbers have started to go down in this country. And this is a Gallup poll I'm talking about. Now, there's still tremendous numbers. Any elected official, politician, or public figure would love to have the popularity numbers that he's got. But they've gone down somewhat across the board among Catholics, Protestants, and among liberals and conservatives. Tony, what's that all about?
Well, I think when he was elected, there was great excitement about being the first pope from the Western Hemisphere, and of course he's a very engaging, charismatic guy, so his numbers were high. Well, after his first encyclical, where he was very challenging about the wealthy countries and their engagement of developing nations, and then his encyclical on the environment, that challenged a lot of the prevailing wisdom or political sensibilities of people in the country. And I think because he is not trying to play to one side or another, he's not playing politics, he doesn't really do that, everybody had to take a deep breath.
Ricky's going to be coming and speaking to Congress, the first pope who's ever spoken to a joint session of Congress. And the stories I'm reading say that the Democrats are happy he's coming because of some of the things they'll think he's going to talk about. The Republicans are happy that he's coming because he's going to talk about some of the things that they like. And both parties are scared to death of what he may talk about as well. So he does seem to cut down the middle, and sometimes that puts politicians in a little bit of fear.
As Tony said, the Pope does not play politics. What he's bringing is the gospel message. And the gospel message at its root is very challenging. It calls for us to respect life from beginning to end. In a political sense, often that causes a divide where liberals and conservatives have somewhat different takes on that, not looking at the full breadth of that. So we often say Catholic teaching doesn't line up with politics. It is a challenge.
Tony, there's an AP story I read that the headline says that the Pope will speak, quote, frankly but friendly. What does that mean? What kind of topics do you think he's going to discuss?
Well, I think he will be consistent with the topics he's talked about. On a recent trip to South America, he visited some of the poorest countries there, and he consistently talks about concern for the poor, for people who live on the margins. We must remember them, and economic systems that exploit developing nations or the poor are unjust, and we should ourselves look at those issues, and as governments we should look at those issues.
What about some of the issues that are before Congress? Might he talk about defunding Planned Parenthood? Might he bring up the Iran nuclear treaty might still be up? Will he talk about specific things like that, or stay, Rick, more on an upper level, the 50,000-foot level?
Well, he has stayed on the upper level, high level, speaking in terms of the underlying importance of the issues, rather than getting down into the internal politics of any country that he's visited. And I think he will continue that here with Congress.
Tony, there's a bit of irony, at least for people I think as old as you and I are, that what went on in 1960 when John Kennedy was elected president. He was the only Catholic to serve in that role, and at the time he was running, people said, "Oh, if he's elected, he's going to bring the Pope to Washington. The Pope's going to live in the White House." To have a Pope actually speaking to a joint session of Congress shows how much things have changed over the years.
Well, it's astonishing. Just since from the 1960s until today, it's a mere, what, 50 years.
And the room will be filled with Catholics. I mean, some of the leadership there are Catholics.
It'll be the largest majority single religious denomination in Congress are Catholics. There's 6 Catholic justices on the Supreme Court. The Vice President is Catholic. Speaker of the House is a Catholic. So,
Minority Leader,
yes,
Nancy Pelosi.
Yes, yes. So it is astonishing. I think you and I both remember those days when, well, we would never have seen Catholics in that kind of leadership or a black president, frankly.
The other thing about this, Rick, is that sort of, this from a political point of view, looking at it from a congressional point of view, inviting the Pope here obviously has some politics for them involved. Is this a sign of, A, the continued maturity of the Catholic presence in this country, and the importance of the Catholic vote in these national elections? Let's face it, next year is a national election coming right up, and the Catholic vote has become more and more critical in presidential and congressional elections.
Gosh, I don't know that I could estimate why the Speaker of the House would have invited him, but I do think it's fair to say that as Catholics, we ought to be excited to see the Pope coming in to have a Catholic voice in the public square. That is not a matter that the Catholic Church tells a country how to run and how to operate itself, but our teaching is a solid basis for Catholics to make an informed decision as they go to the polls, and that has repercussions with our government.
Now, Tony, I also noticed that the Pope has been mobilizing his own forces and people in his side of Nobel laureates and others to be in support of his encyclical, I think particularly about both human trafficking and also about global warming. He understands how to use things. He's not a politician, but he knows how to understand things and shape and mold public opinion and political opinion about things.
Yes, he certainly does. He was president of the South American Organization of Bishops, and he certainly was a religious leader in Argentina, and our interface with the government there. So he's a Jesuit, and they are never shy about mobilizing their forces.
Do you expect him to say something different? If his topics be a little bit different when he goes to the UN, he's going to speak to the United Nations as well?
I think probably, of course, you never know what he's going to say, but I think, Pat, that when he goes to the United Nations, we can expect him to speak up for marginalized people around the world. Certainly he might address human trafficking. Certainly he might address ecology and taking care of the planet where we all live. And certainly he will speak about war and peace.
Rick, when John Paul II came here, and he came here several times, usually after that was over, his popularity numbers went back up again in the polls. Would you expect a similar thing to happen this time after Francis has been here?
You know, I think so. I think anytime you're exposed to someone with the skills and the personality that Pope Francis has projected so far, you know, he is inviting, engaging, and he does draw people to him, and we'll just have to see how people listen to his message, how he receive the message. But I would expect and hope that happens. Talking about the upcoming trip of Pope Francis to this country in September. We're talking with Rick Masacchio, who's the editor of the Tennessee Register and communications director for the Catholic Diocese of Nashville, and Tony Spence, who's also a former editor of the Tennessee Register, but is now the head of the U.S. Catholic News Service that will be the national coverage for the Pope's visit here. Back to continue our conversation with these gentlemen after this break.